All right, everyone. Thanks for hanging out. It's First and Pod. We were like, you know what? What are we going to do? It's June. Oh, I know. Let's see if we can gamble on the NFL. That's a good idea. So we are going to do over-unders. These have been out for a while. Our opinions can change. We will revisit this, I'm sure, middle to late training camp. But you ready to pick some over-unders and make some cases here, Pony?
I am. This idea beat out drafting quarterbacks. And when I saw that another prominent podcast drafted quarterbacks this week and it went viral, I did not want to have to compete with that. So we are now doing this instead. Maybe we'll do the quarterback thing in a few weeks once the dust settles from another podcast that I will not name doing a quarterback draft.
Well, I saw that Nick and Colin did a quarterback draft. Is that the one you're talking about?
I don't know if that was maybe that's the podcast I'm thinking of that did huge numbers and went viral.
I don't even know what you're talking about, but I think it's a lot of people who drafting quarterbacks.
Of course, that's what I'm talking about. That's why we're not doing that. I had that idea on Monday, and then they went and did it. So this is what we're doing.
All right, I don't know if you're talking about like Mina Kimes and Nate Tice, or I don't know who you're talking about.
No, I was talking about It's Always Game Day in Buffalo, that 2400 Sports podcast, which actually does very good numbers from what I've heard from corporate. I will do Buffalo's over-under early on here, but I won't do it first. I've organized mine by the highest win total down to the lowest. So that means I'm starting with the Kansas City Chiefs. The number is 11.5. I am going over on the Chiefs. They won 11 last year, and wide receivers had Butterfingers. And it was like the soap in the shower situation with them, with Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Kadarius Toney. I could go on and on. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I really believe that this has a chance to be a 2007 Patriots-like regular season for them, where we are talking about and marveling at the greatness of this coach, quarterback, tight end combination and the moves they've made around those guys. Yes, we got to see what happens at left tackle. And yeah, we've got to see what happens at corner. But so many things went wrong for them in the regular season last year, and they still won the division again in 11 games. It was the first time in the Andy Reid era their win total went under. Believe it or not, in Kansas City, it's gone over every year. I think this year it will go under or go over, Danny, and I don't think it'll be close. I think we could be looking at a 15-2, 16-1 type season for the Chiefs.
So funny. I mean, I wrote that note basically about Andy Reid always going over his win total until this past year and everything that went wrong. Also, I'm waiting for them because they haven't played this card yet. When are they going to play the last hurrah card? Like this is the last time Mahomes and Kelsey get to make a run, because Mahomes will make many more runs. And Andy Reid, it seems like, is going to make many more runs. But Kelsey cannot possibly have many more runs in him. So I could see them using that internally, if not sharing it externally, sooner rather than later, and just cherishing what they have and say, you know what, not that we're locking him into retirement, but an acknowledgement of his powers are going to diminish at some point. It's just impossible not to, given the age and the physical demands of the position. And we've already seen it a bit with his production and his yards after catch numbers last year. So I do think that there is a sense of urgency to cherish and maximize the rest of the Mahomes-Kelsey window. So I'm with you on the over for the Chiefs. I did mine alphabetically because we agree on the topics ahead of time, but not how we're going to organize them. So I'm going to give you the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah, you figure the audience wants to get that Arizona Cardinals discussion out of the way right off the bat. That's what they're craving here. Let's get that Arizona Cardinals. I'm guessing you like the over because we've been talking about how we think they're a great candidate to go over on just about every podcast.
Yes, I do. The number is 6.5, but here's what I thought was interesting about them. One of the highest juiced teams in the league. It's minus 178 to the over. So it hasn't moved yet. Like the Steelers number moved. You know, the Steelers were 7.5 for a while. And now when we get to your team, we've got to talk about them, you know, in a different light as an 8.5 team. But Arizona still hasn't moved off of 6.5. So you've got to be willing to basically lay, $180 to win 100 on them. So this is going to get to 7 by training camp. So I'm more comfortable actually with 7 at -110 than I am at 6.5 at -178, just for the juice factor. And I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. When Kyler was healthy, they were one of, if not the best running teams in football last year. Second year in the system with the coach, massive influx of talent in the draft with the 11 draft picks, including Marvin Harrison Jr. A division that is good, but I don't think is necessarily as good as it's been across the board. I think this is an overspot, but we're not unique. We're not as unique on this as I thought, Pony, when I saw that juice number.
Or we're powerful enough where people have listened and they have taken our advice and applied it.
That's possible.
Yes. I mean, we do have so many sharp bettors, as the term goes, who listen. The Ken Barkleys and Nick Costoses of the world, maybe taking some of the cut-ups and clips that get sent out virally here.
Oh, that's interesting.
From this and taking that.
Congratulations, by the way, to Nick Costos on becoming a father.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's just back from paternity leave. Baby, I think Colette was the name of his daughter.
I should send him a message because he's always very good about doing that stuff for me. So I appreciate you pointing that out, because I will have to now do that. Because when people do that for me and then I don't reciprocate, then I look like an a-hole. So I need to make sure I go do that. Yep. Ravens have the highest win total, tied with the Chiefs. It's 11.5. You'd have to be a complete bozo to bet the over here. You'd have to have your head examined to bet the over. Let's count the reasons why it's a bad idea. They have the second hardest schedule in the entire NFL, behind the Browns. Now, they have a little bit of rest built in there. The Warren Sharps have pointed that out. But let's also go through what they've lost from last year. Their offensive line, basically, other than Tyler Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley, is all new. And Linderbaum is a very good center. Stanley is an off-injured and up-and-down left tackle. And I don't think for Lamar Jackson, who's been hurt 2 out of the last 3 years, and Derrick Henry, who needs, I think, to get ahead of steam and needs a little bit of a hole to get going. He's not Barry Sanders, who's going to make guys miss and create his own yards that way without great blocking or even decent blocking. I'm not sure that's a good match. I don't think it's a good match. Their wide receivers, Andrews is a great tight end. Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman are the 1-2 punch at receiver. I'm not in love with that. And then defensively, the coordinator, the brains behind the operation, are gone. Geno Stone left for Cincinnati. They did re-sign Matabuke. We know that Patrick Queen is in Pittsburgh now with the Steelers, so they lost an all-pro linebacker, although maybe some of that was a creation of playing with Roquan Smith. Just a very, very high number in a division with no bad teams. You're going to play 6 games against representative teams. The Bengals are going to be back. The Steelers are always decent, and the Browns at least have talent on paper and are getting guys healthy. So I see no way they go 11-6 or 12-5 or better this year, Danny. That's just a very, very difficult ask for them.
Under juice to -162. So that is certainly conventional wisdom. It's one I agree with. 2 just quick schedule quirks for them. Their bye isn't until week 14. Their first 3 games: at Dallas, home against Buffalo, at Cincinnati.
I love that you're now bringing these things up weeks after the schedule draft, or the schedule pod, that you were clearly distracted because you knew you had a huge TV appearance and there was also a gigantic NBA game going on at the same time. So I just want the record to state, Spencer, that was a cogent point and very well stated that could have been brought up 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago when we did a podcast that was about that exact topic.
That's fair, but you are more in charge of the AFC and I handle the NFC around here. So good job by you. Atlanta, over under of 9.5. To me, I said it a couple of pods ago, they're this year's Detroit for me. I'm not saying they're going to the
public NFC perception, or you actually feel like they're Detroit. Because I agree that they're a very trendy, popular team like Detroit was, but are you buying into that?
What I'm buying into is not what I was for Detroit last year. Before the season, I picked them to go to the Super Bowl. They ended up in the NFC Championship game. I am not saying Atlanta is going to the Super Bowl or the NFC Championship game, but what I mean is, for me specifically, my biggest preseason bet last year was Lions NFC North minus 140. The fact that Atlanta is like minus 115 to win the NFC South is absolutely insane. They're a good defense. They're a good offense. They upgraded significantly at quarterback and with the systems that they're going to be running. So I think that this is a 10-win team, no problem. I'm happy to pay less than minus 150. It's minus 148 right now. You can line shop around and maybe find a little bit better. But I already have them to win the NFC South, and I also like their win total over. So Atlanta 9.5 is an over for me.
I hate locking in money that far in advance that you've already put that in this far out from the start of the season. But good on you. I like having.
I have no problem doing it for the NFL because it's just like I know I want to have positions in all over the place in the NFL. So I have no problem doing it for the NFL.
Are you investing in GameStop, or is that not even something that enters into your daily decision making? Are you doing any of that stuff?
No, I'm having serious FOMO over the fact that my brother-in-law is an engineer for NVIDIA who gets paid a little bit in stock, and I could have easily invested just to ride the wave with him 10 years ago, and I certainly would not be doing this pod if that was the case.
Story of your life is you've done very well for yourself, but there's just a bevy of missed opportunity.
A bevy of them. There's a few big ones. There's a few big ones. Yeah.
Well, now that we're on the topic of gambling and risk management and whatnot, you ever just go to a roulette table and just keep doubling your bets on either black or red until it hits?
Yeah. That's happened.
That's me with the Bills, and that's why I'm going under 10.5 with them. I'm going to keep doing it until I'm right, damn it. And I think that this is the year I am right.
What are we up to, $5,000 here on the Bills under this
year? Yeah. This is like the third year in a row on the podcast. Although, if you remember, they got the price on them dropped so much when they were 6-6 last year that I said this is the time to invest in them. And it was another one of our classic great loser bets.
Oh, love a good loser. Good value loser. That's
yeah. We bought low and the price went up, but they didn't end up doing much with it. Yeah, I mean, it's Josh Allen, and we'll see what else. We'll see if now with a full offseason, Joe Brady is going to actually install the offense he wants. It did not work in Carolina with Matt Rule. It was brutal. And or does he just do what McDermott tells him to do, which last year was run the ball a ton? And that included a lot of design runs for Josh Allen, which really is an unstoppable play. But the more you do that, the more you're begging your quarterback to finally miss time because he takes a hit or gets rolled up on or some accident happens. We'll see Keon Coleman at wide receiver and Kincaid in his second year and just how much they can get from those guys. There's really no good proven commodities. I still think the offensive line is potentially a problem with guys getting older. Defense is revamped. We'll see. We don't even know yet if McDermott is going to keep calling plays. And he was good at it last year, but that still seems to be an open-ended situation there. So, yeah, I don't like the team as much as I did 2 years ago. And I'm going to bet eventually that one man can't make up for all the holes that are on their roster now from bad drafting and bad decisions. So, under on the Bills.
The drafting has been terrible. We've been all over that. We disagree on the strengths of the superpowers of Josh Allen. They're an over team for me. Not a strong one, not an early investment, but this is, I don't anticipate their totals going much lower in Josh Allen's prime. I do think Diggs could be an addition by subtraction situation, given how terrible he was down the stretch last year. So Buffalo is still an over team for me until further notice. Generally speaking, one of the rules is like high totals go over, low totals go under. I struggled to come up with a way to make the case for Carolina over 5.5 wins, even though the juice is to the over. And I know you think that people have quit on Bryce Young too early. So I'll leave that for you to make the case. 4 of their first 6 are on the road, and the 2 home games are Cincinnati and Atlanta. That's not a good start. And that doesn't include games against Kansas City, Philly, Dallas, 2 road games to end the year. Bryce Young has been left in such a terrible situation that I do not think that he's going to overcome the beginning of that schedule, the lack of talent around him, the lack of premium assets of young players that they can support him with in the draft. So I think he's just one of those guys that will end up having to leave Carolina for a better situation sooner rather than later, in order to get a fair shake at it, because so much of success in the NFL is based on circumstance, and he was drafted into a horrible circumstance. And I'm not rushing to bet the under, but I'm not making a case for it. I have low teams that I have cases for the over later in the pod, but this is not one of them.
Well, there's one of these teams every year that has a very low number, sometimes 2, and they end up going way over the very low number. The Texans were one of those teams last year. And so, that I think it would not take much for Carolina to get to 6 wins. You liked them going into last season.
I did.
You said that you thought Bryce Young was actually going into a good situation because they had traded with the Bears to get that pick.
Yeah, I'm not changing that year.
No doubt. I mean, it was also chaotic coaching, and they had very little in playmaking. Not that they completely overhauled that. Deontay Johnson is not going to fix that problem.
Correct. So, it's not exactly DJ Moore and Christian McCaffrey.
No, I don't love it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is where I would go right off the bat to bet an over, but I would definitely not bet the under and say they're going to be 4-13 or 3-14 again. Bengals over for me, 10.5. I know I said the Ravens are in a tough division, and that would count for the Bengals too, although they do have the easiest strength of schedule, having finished in last place last year. And the T. Higgins thing is still hanging over them a bit. Who knows when he actually shows up? And as you've pointed out on TV eloquently, is he going to even be willing, and Nick has done this too, is he going to be willing to play hard and play through injury if he doesn't have a new contract? I thought that was a very cogent point to make on this. I see very, very, very little weaknesses on their team. I think they cleared up some of their offensive line stuff. We got Tyler Boyd replaced with Jermaine Burton from Alabama, who has the talent to be one of the 5 or 6 best receivers in this draft, but just has a history of transferring and never sticking in one place. And there's some character issues. So he's really a perfect Bengals player in that regard. They signed defensive tackles and linemen to beef up their front center and gets tougher against the run. I don't think they'll miss Joe Mixon at all. And Burrow is just, when he plays, you can pencil him in for at least 30 touchdown passes. So 11 wins. I mean, they could get off to a 2-2 start again this year, and I still think they would do well enough to get to 11. Yeah, they're one of my favorite bets this year, over 10.5.
I want to hear that Burrow's zipping a ball. I want to see it. Like to me, he's like I want to see him in the preseason. I want to see training camp reports.
I don't want to see him play in the preseason at all. I don't want him to risk injury in meaningless games.
I'm just saying, before I bet it, maybe if they start 2-2, I can bet it live then during the season. I want to be convinced that the wrist is fine and that he's got everything that he has in terms of arm strength there, because listen, when he plays, they win. When he plays, they win. But I want to be sure that he's at 100% before I'm investing in him. All right, my Chicago Bears. I don't know when this number is going to get to 9, but it's probably going to be the Hard Knocks bump. So it's 8.5 right now. The juice is to the over at -150. So it's not a guarantee that it gets to 9, but they're everybody's darling. They get talked about on national TV, it seems like, every other day. They've got the number one.
Well, that's because you are now appearing on these shows every other day. Let's not get it twisted. A lot of it is that Danny Parkins is in demand.
I'm not appearing on it nearly enough, Pony. Nearly enough. Trying to do more. But they upgraded at quarterback, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, and running back.
Yep.
That's pretty significant. Now, their defense, I do think, is being a little overrated. Their back 7 is very good. Their secondary is very young. But the quarterbacks that they beat last year, the best ones were Jared Goff, who they could have beaten twice, and Kyler Murray. The other ones were Taylor Heineke and Josh Dobbs and Sam Howell and Brian Hoyer. It was nothing that you would be impressed with. So they need to prove that their defense, which they did not upgrade the defensive line at, can actually compete with good teams. But even if I think the defense has been a little overrated, I actually think even with all of the attention, the offensive upgrades are being a little underrated. So I definitely think this team's going to have a winning record. So I am comfortable saying over 8.5 wins for the Chicago Bears this year.
As you should. Do you think you'll be on bigger futures? Do you think you'll be on NFC North Championship, NFC winner, things like that?
Yeah. If for no other reason than, I already have a Caleb MVP bet just because 70. I still think that there was a scenario, there was a version of last year playing out where if Stroud had 33 touchdowns instead of 23 touchdowns, Stroud would have been in that conversation.
Which we talked about. Well, you needed to offset that horrible Stafford to win the MVP bet. So I'm happy that you diversified.
Thank you.
And made some better decisions.
I got a couple of NFC quarterback loser MVP bets going. Yeah.
So I have Houston next year. Their number's 9.5. I want to pound the over, but I'm scared to death by the number that they set.
I know, dude. It's such an over. It's such an.
But
I got a theory why it's low.
Okay, well, I'm interested in hearing that because they won 10 games last year and they've gotten significantly better. So can you tell me why it is so low?
I think it's because that division's going to be sneaky good. I think it's because Indy is better with Richardson healthy and coaching continuity, and Jacksonville is expected to be better with everybody buying into Trevor Lawrence and the offensive upgrades that they've made. And so I think that it actually is just that the AFC South is not the worst division in football anymore. So there are not as many easy wins in-house for Houston.
What are the offensive upgrades that the Jaguars have made?
Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas to go with Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk and Travis Etienne. I mean, that's a pretty deep skill position group, man. They used a first-round pick on a wide receiver when they had all of those issues in the secondary. Like that.
We'll have a 1, but they've got, well, I guess Ingram would be the 1 because he catches a million balls.
There. Yeah, I mean, it's an unconventional skill position group, but it's pretty deep. That's 5 legitimate pass catchers with Etienne, Ingram, Kirk.
I'm betting the over, but it just seems almost too good to be true.
Yeah, I get it. I get that. Dallas 10.5. This is a fascinating one.
No, it's not. It's easy. You go under here. There's no reason to go over. They've gotten worse. They lost their defensive coordinator. There's so much pressure on them to win. They're handing the ball off to Zeke Elliott and Rico Dowdle. Their offensive line is in complete overhaul mode. Dak wants to put up a big year. Pressure on him. Too much pressure, in my opinion. McCarthy could get fired at any point. They're an under team. You think they're over?
I don't know. I think a lot of the reasons that people are saying they're an under team and the juice is on the under is because of things that are not they're not necessarily correlated to wins. Pressure, contracts, job security. They've won 12 games 3 years in a row.
Yes, those things were not concerns last year, Danny.
Hold on a
Maybe
second.
McCarthy a little bit, but the other things were not.
You don't think there was pressure on Dak Prescott to have a career year last year?
I don't think he was playing for a new contract last year. Clearly he wasn't, because his numbers would have gotten him a new deal.
Well, first of all, it's still in play that he gets a new deal. The season has not started yet. It's May or it's June. So he could still get a new contract. CeeDee Lamb could still get a new contract. And if those guys sign contract extensions, now you'd be willing to entertain them as an over team?
I would be more willing to, yes.
See, I think that's the type of thing. I think that's not football reasoning. Dak Prescott's
it's business of football reasoning.
No, but Dak Prescott is going to get paid $60 million a year to be a quarterback in the NFL in 2025 by somebody. He is. If Kirk Cousins just got $180 million at 35 coming off of an Achilles injury, Dak Prescott does not have to worry about his next contract. He might not be a Cowboy, but he might not even want to be a Cowboy. He is going to get paid. CeeDee Lamb is going to get paid. I mean, Jerry Jeudy got all that money as a receiver. Christian Kirk got all that money as a receiver. Like, these guys are so good relative to the salary cap and the market. They will get paid. So Dallas chokes in the playoffs. Now, listen, there's a scenario where they lose to Detroit, Cleveland to open, Baltimore in week 3, Detroit in week 6, maybe in Pittsburgh in week 5 on Sunday Night Football, go 2-4 into the bye, fire their coach, and the wheels come off. I'm not saying that that's out of the realm of possibility, but let's not pretend like this isn't an incredibly talented team at premium positions. They've got great corners, great edge rushers, a great receiver, a very good quarterback. They led the league in scoring last year, and they've won 12 wins 3 years in a row. Like, I'm not running to bet the over, but I think that I was surprised to see the juice was on the under at 10.5. That strikes me as a narrative-based thing of people talking about contracts and controversy and firing.
Yes, those are all the things that I said. Sometimes the narrative is right. Sometimes cliches are right.
Okay. I'm just saying that there's been pressure and spotlight and controversy around the Dallas Cowboys every year that Mike McCarthy's been there, and it normally comes in the playoffs, not the regular season. We got more First and Pod after this. All right, we're doing over-under. Subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. First and Pod, Danny Parkins, Andrew Fillipponi. Who's next?
Dolphins at 9.5. I have them under. I have Miami under here. You're not going to want to hear me talk about the Tua contract situation, so I won't make that the basis of my argument.
I'm just saying. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I just think that I think their defense. I think their defense is a question mark. You lose Fangio and you lose Christian Wilkins. Those are two. That's a pretty big deal. Now you're hoping Chubb comes back and finally can stay healthy and look like the player he was before. Same thing with Jalen Phillips. But again, you're asking these guys to go back to where they were pre-injury and also either jump on a moving train and be as good as they were, or, be great right when the season starts. I'm not convinced that's going to happen in either case. Look, I mean, I think the offense with McDaniel calling plays, as long as Tyreek Hill is healthy, they're going to, he can call and scheme up runs. They're going to score a lot of points. But I could see them being a wildly entertaining team this year that plays shootout games, and their defense is like the Bengals last year, where they go from being above average to being one of the 5 or 6 worst defenses in the entire league. So yeah, and Buffalo, I've got them under 10.5, and I've got the Dolphins under 9.5 too. So I'm against both of the AFC East big favorites or playoff contenders, I should say, this year.
Well, are you over on the Jets?
You'll find out. I think they are next on my list. Okay.
By the way, the Tua point would be different than the Dak point in terms of contract pressure.
Yes, because he's not going to get $60 million from teams won't all be vying and treating him the same way.
Yeah, I mean, if Tua has a bad season or an injury-filled season, he's not going to reset the quarterback market.
You're right. I agree with that.
And Dak already has signed, what, a 4-year, $160 million contract before? Like,
yep.
Dak's got high 8 figures in the bank. You know, that is not the situation that Tua is in. So I do think that those situations are different. Detroit, 10.5. This is one of the closest coin flips in terms of the juice. People are completely split on this team. And the division is very good and much improved. People think Green Bay is on the up and up. People think that Chicago is on the up and up. I agree with both of those statements. And I think that Minnesota is the best 4th place team, arguably, in any division in the NFL. But I continue to think that there's some sort of narrative that's like, well, it's Detroit. Nothing about them is fluky. They have an excellent offensive line, a quarterback who, when he is protected, doesn't make mistakes. They, for some reason, did not invest more in wide receiver 2 when they lost Josh Reynolds. But Jameson Williams is a former 12th overall pick out of Alabama who's now an extra year removed from the knee surgery. And kind of like we were talking about with Jacksonville, yeah, their wide receiver depth chart is really weak and unproven behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, but Sam Laporta could catch 100 balls.
Yep.
And Jahmyr Gibbs could catch 80 balls. Like, Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have an Alvin Kamara-like season if he's healthy. He is so good. So it's not like they don't have pass-catching options for Goff. It's just they're not necessarily receivers. Now, if Amon-Ra St. Brown got hurt, they would have some legit concerns there. But I liked how they invested in corner. Their GM is clearly, Holmes is clearly awesome. Campbell is clearly awesome. Ben Johnson is clearly awesome, and he doesn't leave. Their first 4 games, they have an early bye, which I don't love, but their first 4 games, home against the Rams, home against the Bucks, in Arizona, home against Seattle, bye. They're going to be 4-0 with a week to get ready for Dallas. So I think Detroit's an over team this year again.
Defense still concerns me. You're right about the corner improvements, the moves they made. They take the kid from Alabama in the first round, Arnold, because he fell down, and they moved up to make sure they got him. That was a very shrewd move. But, you know, outside of Aiden Hutchinson, I still think questions about the architect, the guy that's, you know, designing things defensively, Aaron Glenn, and their overall performance against the pass specifically is still an issue. And until proven otherwise, it's probably going to be the thing that prevents me from saying that they're a lock to be right back to where they were last year. I've come around on Goff, and St. Brown is one of the best to do it, and their offensive line is spectacular. And I don't doubt the coach, although he made some questionable decisions in an NFC Championship game. This is regular season win totals. But if we're ranking defenses, I don't think they're top 10.
I agree with that. Do you think this is interesting? We are through Detroit. If we did this alphabetically, which I know you did not, but I did, but I noticed this one, I wrote it out alphabetically. 11 of the 32 teams in the NFL by city name are through the first 4 letters of the alphabet.
I do not find that interesting.
Okay, cool. Keep it moving.
Jets, they're an over team, 9.5. I'm doing it again. I'm betting on Aaron Rodgers. I'm betting on him with something to prove. That was my feeling on him. The Jets being a quarterback away going into last year. We've seen him take incompetent offensive coordinators and over their head coaches and overrated head coaches and win big with them. I get it. He's 40 now. We saw Drew Brees, Brett Favre, and Tom Brady all play great at 40 and older. So, yeah, like I think that with Garrett Wilson for a full year, I like the offensive line improvements. Fashanu, bringing Morgan Moses back to play right tackle, and their defense was good enough without any quarterback play to speak of to keep them in that game against Kansas City on a Sunday night and to beat Philadelphia when they were record-wise the best team in football. And so if they're not completely done in by bad offense and that deflating aspect of play, I think we're talking about one of the most improved teams in the entire NFL this year. And Aaron Rodgers will win comeback player of the year if what I'm saying hits, that they get more than 9 wins, double-digit wins, and get back to the playoffs for the first time since 2010 for the New York Jets. It's been that long.
In looking this up today, I stumbled upon a prop bet for the New York Jets. You ready for this?
Yep.
Breece Hall over 975 rushing yards. Is there any world in which he's not a 1,000-yard rusher with what they did on the offensive line with a healthy Aaron Rodgers? With how
I think there actually is.
How?
I think there actually is. I think they'll work in the young running backs behind him because of his injury history. The guy from Wisconsin, Allen, who they picked in the 4th round, is a very good player. And if running back were valued like the other positions, he would not have been a day 3 pick. It's a disposable position. So a guy with that pedigree and resume becomes a day 3 pick, even though he's fast. He's not a plodding Wisconsin running back. So I think he gets in the mix. I think Abanikanda gets in the mix too.
Wow.
I think they spread the workload around there with the Jets. So that's a tricky one for me, but I do like Haugh.
I think he's really good. Green Bay Packers over-under is 9.5. The over is juiced at -134.
I bet the over.
Dude, I know, but here's my issue. I like the Lions over, the Bears over, and the Packers over. Can the Lions win 11 and the Bears and Packers both win 10? The answer is yes.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, look at the AFC North last year.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But that's what it has to be. I mean, in contention for best division in football, and that is where I'm at on this. Like, LaFleur's awesome. Jordan Love is disgustingly good. The young offense should get better strictly through continuity. The defense should get better strictly from coaching upgrade with getting rid of Joe Barry. They're a double-digit win team. They've got a very good quarterback and a very good offense and a very good coach and an improved defense. They're good. They're a good team. I hate to say it, but they are. So,
well, I'm going to do the opposite here. Browns 8.5. I will be sprinting at some point once we get closer to the season to bet the under here, provided that the juice is not prohibitive and there isn't something that happens around them that makes me change my mind about the Browns' outlook.
No, the under's plus money right now at 8.5.
Freaking love it. Absolutely love it. I think they set a number that hoodwinks and tricks casual bettors into taking the Browns.
Yeah, they won 11 games last year.
They won a lot of games last year. They had the coach of the year. They had the defensive player of the year. They're getting Nick Chubb back. They added Jerry Jeudy to go with Amari Cooper. Their offensive line is going to get healthy. Blah, 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 blah. I don't trust Deshaun Watson for a second. I think it's the worst contract in the NFL now that the Russell Wilson thing got sorted out. Their offensive line doesn't have the genius coach that it had in Callahan. He's now off to help his kid in Tennessee. They're starting an absolute bum at inside linebacker named Devin Bush, who couldn't tackle you or me right now. Outside of Myles Garrett, I think their front seven has more questions than people think, even though Jim Schwartz is a really good coach. And yeah, there's also no guarantee that Nick Chubb is the guy he was before, what was not like a standard knee injury in operation to fix it. So someone's got to finish at the bottom of that division. And I'm picking the Browns with the hardest schedule in the NFL, 11 teams last year that finished with a winning record.
The only thing that I disagree with slightly is that even if Deshaun Watson is horrendous, it seems like every other quarterback was able to win with that roster. So maybe it won't be him.
What?
I mean, listen, I'm sure it will be, but dude,
do you think there's a scenario that he would get benched and Jameis would get that job on his performance?
Listen, That team, that roster, they think that roster.
Well, you're not answering. You're avoiding the question here, and you're not answering it.
No, you're misunderstanding my point, though. You're misunderstanding my point.
I do get your point, but I'm interested in you believing in that point all the way where the GM and coach would say Watson's wasting the talent on this roster. Let's bench him and play somebody else.
Well, first of all, it could get to that point.
Okay.
Sure, it could. But what I'm saying is if Joe Flacco could go 4-1 with that team and 5 different quarterbacks could win a game with that roster, Deshaun Watson needs to merely not be awful and they can win games. Now, he might be awful. He might be cooked. He might be done. He might be over. But he just needs to merely not be awful for them to be a competitive team. I do think it's a very talented roster, but overall you made a compelling case. We need to pick up the pace here on this podcast. I believe my next team is the Los Angeles Rams. If I am betting Matt Stafford for MVP, my friend, they're going to have a winning record over LA Rams, 8.5. Lock it in.
Somebody's got to be the odd man out in the AFC South. I'm going to go Colts under 8.5. Now, I have said to you that I think that Anthony Richardson is a complete and total wild card where he could be a star. And then that's a rocking chair bet if he is. You're going to get to 9 wins and you're going to get there pretty easily. And they have a good offensive coach. I'm just not a big fan of where they're at defensively. They take the first defensive player in the draft, this an edge rusher. They might have the worst collection of corners in the entire league. And I don't think that's a good way to go into 2024 in a division with CJ Stroud and Trevor Lawrence in the AFC. So, yeah, I mean, it was a miracle job by Steichen last year to get them to week 18 with a chance to make the playoffs with a win, with Richardson missing as much time as he did. But I would bet on them. And we don't even know if Richardson can get through a season healthy based on the way he plays either. And then Flacco would have to go in an offense that's not really designed or set up for him. Under on the Colts.
Wow. All right. There's a disagreement. I think that there is a team there that has a very, very, very high ceiling if Richardson is healthy. I think that their ceiling is an 11-win football team.
But if he looks like the guy he did at Florida outside of the few highlight plays, they could also be a 4-13 team and have like the first or second pick in the draft next year. That's also not off the table.
So you didn't see enough in the 4 games to convince you that he's not overwhelmed by NFL football?
You know what? I think there's a lot of Justin Fields there, to be honest with you. And so there's a lot to like about Fields. There's also a lot to maybe question about Fields. So no, to answer your question, I'm not completely convinced after 4 games.
All right. The Minnesota Vikings, 7.5 is the total.
Go over on all 4.
I can't. I think that McCarthy is going to take some time. It's a good situation for a rookie, though, man. Good coach, Addison, obviously Justin Jefferson, but it's a brutal division. The defense got worse. I think that this is my under team in the NFC North. Pretty obviously, the juice is very slightly juiced to the under there. I think it's plus 130 on the over. So good number set. Plenty of disagreement in the market, but I will assume that he is not ready for prime time. McCarthy is, and I'll take the under.
So much for that executive that turned.
Again, it's not about McCarthy. It's not about him being bad. It's just about them not winning 8 games.
I'm going to go under on Jacksonville, 8.5. I'm going to go under on them.
Who do you think finishes second in the AFC South then? Because you just went under on Indy also.
Yeah, I know.
Well, so I'm just curious.
I'm happy that you're paying enough attention this time where you're keeping up with the things that I'm saying. I appreciate that.
Well, the Cubs
we've not gotten to every team.
So you do not have all of my attention, but you have some of it.
Wait, what?
The Cubs just hit a walk-off homer in Cubs socks.
That's why you raised your fist in the air. I saw that.
Yeah, thank you.
No, I'm going under on them. They've got cornerback issues just like Indianapolis. I'm also starting to come around to your idea that Lawrence is just going to be a roller coaster at the position. And this is such a make or break year for him in terms of where is he in the NFL quarterback pecking order? Is he destined to always like tease and tantalize you and make you think that he's really that good, but it just comes in spurts? Or is he going to be a consistency separates good from great? And so I loved this team last year. Maybe there's some of that creeping in, that they let me down so badly. This is a buy low spot. The number isn't that high. But I just don't feel great. I don't feel good about them, Danny. Something just feels off to me about the Jaguars, which is not the most like deep, cutting edge analysis to say something is off about them. To me, it's a totally ephemeral kind of emotional point, but that's just my read on them. It's just not right. It's not what it should be based on the quarterback and coach combination there.
So I agree with you. I think Arik Armstead was an interesting addition because I thought it was shocking that they didn't invest more in their secondary, but maybe they're just flatly saying, we need to surround Trevor Lawrence with as much as we possibly can. So, again, Gabe Davis, Brian Thomas, and Arik Armstead will make that defensive line top 10 in the NFL, and that'll be good enough. Every team has weaknesses, and they'll win shootouts because you're going to be able to pass on them. So maybe Armstead is the only thing that they feel like they need on the defensive side of the ball. Trevor Lawrence needs to stop fumbling the ball in the red zone. Like, between the 20s, that dude looks the part. But then he throws picks in the red zone and he fumbles in the red zone, and it drives me absolutely insane. But if not now, they'll fire a coach and he'll have 3 coaches in his first 5 years, and they're not even willing to say right now who his play caller is going to be. So I agree with you. Things are a little weird in Jacksonville, but 8.5 wins, they should be able to hit that number. My next team, sorry, I lost my spot. It would be the New Orleans Saints of the aforementioned NFC South. The juice here.
Under. I would bet butt off on the under here.
Dude, I agree with you. Unders plus money at 7.5.
F these guys. I can't stand this team anymore. Another one where I've been so burned where they're not getting anything from me.
But so what's funny about you with this team, because it's 7.5, and I wrote out the numbers before I did it to try to like guess them. It's not that hard to do. And I put it at 8. So I think it's a good number. You know, I think it's about where it should be. They easily could finish second in this division. But I was more interested in what you had to say about him because I didn't know anybody who was a bigger Derek Carr fan than you. Literally.
Correct.
Nobody.
And then I watched him closely last year and thought his situation was analogous to Stafford getting out of Detroit and getting to the Rams. And then I quickly realized, A, he's not that guy. And B, he didn't have the support system around him in terms of play calling, offensive infrastructure, offensive play design, all of those things. And so I still feel that way. At some point, Kamara is going to no longer be a good NFL running back. I think Father Time is catching up to him. Offensive line, trying to rely on a lot of young guys to fix what has been a pretty mediocre unit. Wide receivers after Olave. You know, Michael Thomas ended up being a disaster there. Is Taysom Hill in his 30s still going to be able to give them a spark? Cam Jordan is 100 years old. Honey Badger is old. I mean, he
is old.
Yeah. So I think the bottom could fall out very easily there, and the coach could be fired by the time we're at Halloween. So I'm betting under. I'm next. Chargers over
Even though you just carried that Saints segment. Good job by you.
Chargers over, dude. 8.5. It is a higher number.
Juiced over also, minus
juiced over. I'm going to make a plea here that they should do something between now and the start of the year. They should be the team that trades for Brandon Ayuk. They should be the team that is pushing San Francisco and saying, oh, you don't want to pay him like a Jefferson or like a Jalen Waddle. Let us be the team that does that. I think his style of play would be perfectly fine with Harbaugh, a guy that is a big playmaker, will go over the middle. And you need somebody like that with Herbert. Now that you jettison Williams and Keenan Allen, who's their number one wide receiver there, Danny? Josh Palmer?
Yeah, I mean, and they want it to be the kid they drafted last year out of TCU, Quentin Johnson.
Johnson.
But wouldn't that be I think that they are definitely in play to make a huge play for a receiver next year. It would really surprise me if they didn't pay Williams and Allen and then did it before this year.
Why would you, like, every year it's just the Joe Burrow thing. I'm the window. Every year you have Justin Herbert, you should do everything in your power to try to win a championship with him. And you need to significantly upgrade wide receiver. They will be a better team because they will be better coached this year.
Right. Okay? I agree with you, but I'm an over on the Chargers every single year. You know that I'm the biggest Herbert believer ever. I think that it's absolutely in play that just with better coaching and a better running game, that even with the worst wide receiver core of his career by far, that his numbers don't drop at all.
I'm just saying, I'm thinking beyond just going 9-8. I'm thinking like how to make this team dark horse threat to win a Super Bowl. And I think a trade for Ayuk would put them in that conversation.
So there was once upon a time where I could talk a lot of New York Giants with you, and you were a pretty big fan. They are a 6.5 win team. The juice is on the under, and I'm with them. It's pretty even, plus 122 to the over. Dable, it feels like the shine has come off. They somehow haven't moved on from Daniel Jones. We like the Malik Neighbors pick. That's fine. That's rookie wide receivers are not adding significant amount of win totals to this football team. I think they're clearly the worst team in the NFC East. I think that Washington is. I like Dan Quinn. I like the skill position players that they have there. And even though I was not the biggest fan of the quarterback that they drafted, I do think that they've got a much higher floor offensively in Washington than they do in New York. So I'm an under on the Giants this year.
Well, here's the thing about the Giants, and this is why I would entertain 7-10. Now, we know what happened 2 years ago was a complete fluke. They were not one of the best 8 teams in the NFL. But Jones was a pretty good dual threat quarterback. He was not Cam Newton at the apex of his game, but he was like a Cam Newton derivative in that season, where I think he was equal threat legs and arm, and he had nobody to throw the ball to. Now he has Neighbors. I don't think Darren Waller retiring to write rap music is any big loss. I think in New York, they tell you that Saquon Barkley, outside of 2 years, ended up actually being a bad draft pick. And I think they'll actually replace him decently. And it's about Burns and Lawrence on defense. I mean, that is a great 1-2 punch defensively in your front seven to wreak havoc. And I think that might be enough to carry them to 7 wins. All right, my Steelers are here at 8.5. Danny, I don't really have a great argument for them to go over, but I just would not want to be the guy that had the under bet ticket in my hand.
Dude, people have already bet it up.
I know.
It was 7.5.
I know.
It was 7.5 like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Yep.
And when I saw that, I was like, holy shit. Like, Mike Tomlin's first losing season is upon us. And everyone apparently was just like, no, it isn't. And bet the over. Now it's juiced pretty heavily to the under. It's minus 156. But
They won 10 games last year, and they only had 13 touchdown passes, which was the least in the NFL, the fewest in the league.
I know Mason Rudolph and Mitch Trubisky, man.
Right, but they also got great schedule luck in terms of missing quarterbacks and guys getting hurt and winning one-possession games like crazy. They had a negative point differential. So
I think this is an under team. I think you're looking at a losing season. I think Russ is too conservative, and I think Justin struggles too much to get to the second read. And I just think that it's going to be messy there because I think the locker room will want Justin, and then he'll get the job, and then he won't be good enough, and then you'll end up going back to Russ. I don't think your quarterback in 2025 is on the roster right now. I think this is the year where the offense is too bad for the defense to overcome it.
Well, they're not going to be worse offensively than they were last year. I can guarantee you that. They're just not going to be.
But are they going to be as good defensively?
Well, they were 6th in the league in points allowed last year. They should be that again this year. Hayward's coming back, even though he's 35 years old.
I was going to say they're pretty old.
You've got Watt and Highsmith as your pass rush, and you've got Minkah Fitzpatrick and Joey Porter Jr. in his second year, and your inside linebacker position is hugely better. You've got Patrick Queen, Peyton Wilson, Landon Roberts, Holcomb will come back at some point. Like, middle of their defense was just a sieve by the playoff game against the Bills. So I do think their defense should be, with Tomlin coaching it, should be better. Offensive line has high on pedigree and talent. Those guys just got to coalesce and come together. So it's a reluctant over bet for me. I will allow, though, I am very worried about this because of the look, I think it's possible that Wilson can be good this year. I don't rule that out. If they get 26 touchdown passes from him again this year, Danny, they're going over. They're going to win 9 games if they get 26 and 8 from him again this season.
How many more teams do you have?
I don't have a lot. I have Tennessee, the Patriots, the Raiders, Broncos, 4.
Yeah, this podcast.
Let's go. Yeah. Let's go, Danny.
All right. Philly over under 10.5. This is an under for me. It's a good roster. I understood what they did in the secondary, but Jalen Hurts is a massive wild card at this point.
Wow.
Dude, he is.
You've changed your mind on him.
Well, what he did in the Super Bowl was crazy impressive, but now they paid him.
That whole season was crazy impressive, actually.
Yeah, I know. Now they paid him, and it's a different ball game. And so I think the coach is on the hot seat. I think the quarterback is unproven that, like, if he's figured out, like, the running game matters, but that's an injury-prone situation. It is just there's something about how the sustainability of how he plays that would worry me about giving him $250 million, which is what they did. So I would be an under on Philadelphia this year.
I'm going the under on the Raiders. Now, we like Gardner Minshew. This is a Gardner Minshew show.
Yes, it is. That's why we're so successful.
But I'm not ready to buy into Antonio Pierce. And I think outside of Max Crosby, they're still objectively a pretty bad defense. Even with my appreciation of Minshew, it's still not even an average quarterback situation when compared to everybody else in the league. They're trying to win with tight ends. They draft one. They had the kid from Notre Dame already on the roster. In that division, in that conference specifically, no. Like, I've got them as a team that's going to be like trying to figure out if Shedeur Sanders or Quinn Ewers is the best quarterback in the 2025 draft. Under on the Raiders.
So the Niners is 11.5 for the total, and the over is at plus 122. They are very, very, very good, and they are very, very well coached. But I do think that this is not the time to bet the over on them. I'm not running to bet the under, but part of it is not being fully bought in on Purdy. Part of it is the age of the team. Part of it is the idea of Brandon Ayuk being traded. I think that the drafting of Pearsall signaled that they are going to try to start transitioning a little bit away from some of the age at skill position. Part of it's the offensive line outside of Trent Williams. Like, it is a very, very good team. You know, I love Hufanga, the safety who's back. I think he's one of the most impactful defensive players in football. This is not an argument for the under. It's more of an argument against the over. I am staying away from San Francisco at 11.5.
I'm going to go over on the Titans 6.5. I think that there's a chance they are the one completely random team that ends up winning 9 games and is in a 2-7 wild card playoff game that gets played at 4:30 on like ABC on a Saturday. Like,
so you've got them finishing second in the South.
There are some things about them that intrigue me. I like their wide receiver triplets, Hopkins, Ridley, and Boyd, even though they're older. They will get better offensive line coaching, as I pointed out with Callahan's dad there. I think
is Will Levis good?
No, because I think Rudolph is going to end up being their quarterback. Yep. And the Snead move.
Wait a minute.
What?
You think Mason Rudolph is going to beat out Will Levis?
No, I don't think in the preseason he will.
No, I understand by midseason.
I don't even know if it'll take that long. This coach has no reason to want to hitch his wagon to Levis. Levis wasn't a first-round pick, and it wasn't.
But Mason Rudolph is not good. What is your obsession with Mason Rudolph?
It's not an obsession. It's not even close to an obsession. I nicknamed the guy Mediocre Mason, and I'm pretty sure he hates my guts.
But they're going to finish in front of Jacksonville and Indy with Mediocre Mason?
Yes.
Okay. That's logically consistent. Seattle over-under 7.5. This is a tough one, man. A lot of coaching change there. Like, I'm a Geno believer, but if I'm over on the Rams, under on the Niners, I felt compelled to be over.
Man, that's a weird number for them. I thought it would be higher. Jeez, that is a
that's what I'm saying. That's why
that is a scary number. Only 7.5 on them.
It's why I wrote down over for them. It
goes back to what I've said to you a few times. I almost feel like inherent in that number, coaching change and again,
yes,
different way of looking on things. I don't think Geno Smith has a stranglehold on that job. Sam Howell throws the ball downfield a lot, and they've got big play wide receivers. I could see McDonald getting impatient if they don't get off to a good start and making a quarterback change because they don't look at Geno Smith, the quarterback in his 30s, as their long-term answer there.
Who's next?
I am. Broncos under 5.5. They blow. You know, I like Sean Payton, even though he is obnoxious and arrogant. He called all of his quarterbacks like orphans that nobody loved and nobody wanted. Not a ringing endorsement for what they're trying to do there between Nix and Stidham and Zach Wilson. Yeah, that defense gave up 70 points early last season. So it's not anything that you really want to build your team around. That they're my pick to be the worst team in the NFL. The Broncos.
So Tampa has to play the first place schedule,
Oof.
But it's only a couple of games of impact. I think it's an over at 7.5 wins. Like, it's a tough schedule, man.
Can Baker do it in back-to-back years, and can Baker do it now that he's getting paid?
Well, yeah. I mean, but I think he can. Like,
with a new coach.
I don't want to disrespect them again. I thought they were going to be the worst.
Oh, go ahead, Danny. Come on.
I thought they were going to be the worst team in football last year. That take aged very poorly. So no, I'm not doing it. Atlanta wins the division by 2 or 3 game margin. Tampa comes in second. Carolina and New Orleans are fighting out for the bottom of the division. Over on Tampa.
My last one is the Patriots because they have the AFC's lowest win total at only 4.5. I'm going to go over 4.5. Come on.
Dude, me too. Their defense is good enough to win 6 games.
I actually really like that over. What does that say? Like, that is such a sicko bet. But I'm a big fan of that one. Even
Dude,
like,
but do you want it? But overs minus 162.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know.
Come on, FanDuel.
Well, that's the sickest part of it. Are you really willing to lay significant juice to eke out 5 wins with not Drake May?
What's my Titans over? Is that a plus money one?
That's overs plus 110.
Oh, like that.
Washington over under of 6.5. It's an over for me. I think they've got, like I said, a high floor offensively. I think Philly is coming back to them a little bit. I think the Giants are bad. I think they'll be, they'll score points, coaching improvement, quarterback improvement, vibes improvement, division getting worse. They can eke out 7 wins.
I like in that division taking the 2 teams from the bottom to go over and the 2 teams at the top to go under into flipping.
Yeah, I think it'll be a weird year for that division. All right, we can revisit some of these. We should just Spencer can track what we had, and then we can revisit if we feel the same way come August. But cool. That's Spencer Ray's our producer. Tell a friend, First and Pod. Peace.